Hello there and welcome to another Hero Arts video. It's Michelle Short here, and today I'm going to be creating a cute little scene using the Woodland Tea Party stamp set and coordinating frame cuts. So I've started off by taking the stamps that I want to use from the Woodland Tea Party stamp set and placing those in my mini MISTI. I'm then inking them up with some intense black ink, making sure that they're really well inked up. This is the first time that I'm using these stamps, so I'm going to double stamp them just to get a really good impression, and so it helps to use the mini MISTI for this, but also because I'm using quite a lot of different images, it's quite nice just to stamp them all in one go. So I'm stamping those down onto some Copic friendly white cardstock because I'm going to be colouring them in with some Copic markers. So like I said, I'm just inking them up again so that I can double stamp them, so I get a really nice dark impression on that ink. As I mentioned, I'm going to be colouring my images with Copic markers, but obviously you could colour these with loads of different colouring mediums like coloured pencils or watercolour pencils or watercolour paints or anything you wanted to. I just tend to gravitate towards Copic markers, and I tend to colour with Copic markers darkest to lightest. That's just how I tend to work, and I find that I get a quite nice blend that way. And for my images, I'm going to be having the light source kind of from the front of my scene. So anything on the right hand side of my image is going to have the shadows on the right hand side and the lightness on the left hand side. And anything on the left hand side of my image, the shadows are going to be on the left hand side and the lightness on the right. And then anything sort of in the middle of my scene, I'm going to have shadows on both sides, kind of like this log here in the middle. And I'm using that as my table because I thought that would be quite cute. I'm assuming that that's what it's there for, but obviously you could use it for lots of different things if you wanted to. So I'm going to speed this portion up just because I've got a lot of colouring to do. So I'm going to play some music and let you watch while I colour, and all of the colours that I'm using with my Copic markers are listed on the screen. Once my colouring was completed, I'm then taking the coordinating frame cuts and then I'm just running those through my die cutting machine just to cut out all of my images. To create my background, I'm starting off with a piece of Bristol cardstock, and this is cut with the third largest die from the Nesting Rectangles Infinity Dies collection. And I'm just using the log piece here to work out where I want my sky and my grass to be. So I have a piece of post-it tape and I'm just working out where I want my grass to kind of finish. I do apologise for my head getting in the way here, but I want to make sure that that piece of post-it tape is straight. So just masking off there, and then I'm going to use some inks to blend below for the grass. So I'm starting off with my lightest shade, and this is the Green Apple Bold ink. So I'm using all bold inks for this ink blending here. They blend really nicely. These are a hybrid ink, so they're a combination of dye and pigment ink, so they do blend really nicely, and I'm using the Bristol cardstock just to enhance that blending capability. I find the inks blend really quite nicely on the Bristol cardstock. So I'm just using a light layer of ink here with that green apple, and then I'm going in with the darkest shade, which is the moss colour. And I'm just kind of making sure that that's sort of more towards the top. In the actual finished card you don't really see much of this colour, unfortunately. Kind of where I've placed my critters you don't really see it, but I'm quite glad that I did do it and kind of anyway. So just going in with a light layer of that colour. Just using some light blending motions here. And that's kind of dulling that green apple colour down because that's quite a bright colour. And then I can just remove that piece from my workstation here, and then I'm just going to clean that craft sheet, and then I can just remove that post-it tape, and then I can place that over the grass piece. And then I'm going to go in with the blue shade, which is this summer sky. So just inking up that ink blending tool and just removing that excess ink. This is a really, as the name suggests, it's a bold ink, and so I'm just removing a lot of that ink off of this. Obviously you can add loads of layers, but you can't take away colour, so I'd rather just work slowly adding on the layers here. It is taking me a little while to sort of build up the intensity of colour, but like I said, I'd rather do it this way than have loads of ink and I'm not really happy with it. So just going in with a very light hand here. I'm barely touching that cardstock, but it's quite nice because it kind of blends to sort of white in on the outside pieces, so it's not too harsh. And it's a really nice colour for a sky as well. So when I finish with that, I can just remove that post-it tape, and I don't know how well you can see on camera, but there is a little line in between the grass and the sky. I'm not too concerned about that because my critters are going to cover that up, but I'm just going back in with the blending tools just to see if I can kind of fill in that little gap. Next, I've placed the panel into the Mini Misty again so that I can stamp my sentiment, and I'm using a transparency grid here just to line up that sentiment, and then I've used the images here just to place them down where I want them to sort of end up on my card, just so that I can get a reference point of where I want the sentiment to be placed. And then again I can ink that up with some intense black ink. Just remove the excess there, just want to make sure that that doesn't stamp out onto my panel. And I'm going to stamp that twice again just to make sure that I get a really nice crisp dark sentiment. I want to pop my panel up on my card base, so I have a piece of fun foam here, or foam sheet, and I've added double-sided tape onto the two sides of that, and then I can place that down onto the back of my panel and then onto an A2 white card base. I'm just using a piece of paper there just to press that down, make sure that there's no ink or anything on my hands. And then I'm just going to place all of my little critters and things like that down, just so that I know where I want them to be placed. And then I'm going to stick them down with a combination of foam tape and then tape runner. So anything that I want sort of more in the background, I'm placing down with tape runner. Just using some tweezers there to help me place them down. And off screen I did cut another piece of grass and cut that out as well, just to make sure that I've got a little bit extra one for my card. Thought it would be nice just to have that extra piece there on the right hand side. And then I'm using these thin foam squares here just to add that onto the back of my rabbit and the hedgehog. Just because I've already got the foam on the actual back of the panel itself. I really wanted these critters popped up, but I didn't want to add too much bulk to this card. Here in the UK especially, it's quite difficult to post such sort of bulky cards without adding a lot of extra kind of postage onto it. So it's quite nice just to have that sort of added sort of interest into it with the different layers, but without adding too much bulk. So these foam, like thin foam pads, are quite nice for that. So just taking off the backings with some tweezers there, and then I can place those down. And then I've got all of my little tea party things here. So I've got the little teacup for the rabbit to hold. And it was around this point that I realised that I'd completely lost my teapot. Managed to find it amongst everything on my desk. So I'm just sticking that down with some tape runner. And then I wasn't quite happy with the angle of the teacup, so I'm just managed to kind of lift that up and move that about. Again, I do apologise for my head getting in the way here. And then I've got the plate there which I can stick down, and then the macarons are going to go on top of that. And then I've got the cupcake there as well, which I'm going to place them both down with a little bit of foam tape. So just sticking that cupcake down just to finish that scene. And I hope they don't mind that the cupcake isn't on a plate, but I'm sure they're going to eat that pretty quickly because it does look very nice. So that's the card finished for today. I hope you've enjoyed watching. I do like how this card came out. A little bit more of a spring kind of themed card as opposed to a woodland themed card, but like I said, I do like how it came out. So links to the products that I used will be over on the Hero Arts blog, and there will be a link to the blog post in the description bar on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.